What's up, guys? Sorry about the echo today, but this is a message I was thinking about, and I am a little late on the podcast today because of just craziness going on this week, but really no excuses. Here in the hotel gym, as you can see, just getting ready for my speech later today, so you'll actually hear this on the day that this speech is supposed to happen. But something I want to talk about real quick is somebody asked me, what do you do to prepare yourself for your speech? And honestly, while as a speaking coach, I would suggest that a lot of you should really work through your speech, practice. If you're already kind of doing that practice, maybe you don't need to do it as much. And I know that's not the best advice from a speaking coach. But for myself, what I do is I take life lessons. So I continue to think about what I'm going to speak about, who I'm going to speak to, figure out who that audience is, and then figure out stories that I can plug in with that. And I'll have a couple of points that I'm going to cover and then create stories around that. So actually one of the stories now that I'm going to use is from last night. We were at a little power-up meetup that turned into a small mastermind that was like a pre-game, if you will, to the speaking event today, the Success Summit. And it was crazy because I knew one person in that group that had been divorced. But then we started going around and there was like 3 or 4 people that had been or are going through divorces right now. And we talked about that a lot, talked about marriage. And one of the guys, we were talking to him and helping him through because we were working on people's problems, helping them solve the big problem they have right now. And I want to cover this point because I think it's a good thing for those that are going through a divorce, those that have been divorced. He's got an ex-wife that's very disgruntled, and I don't know his whole situation. I mean, from what I can tell and what I know about him, he is a great guy. He's trying his best to be the best for his children. But I think his wife I know his wife talks down to him about his stuff, but I think that she's also talking down about him to his children. And one of the suggestions that we gave him was, hey, whatever you do, start bringing up your children. If that's really your why, bring them up in everything you do. Bring them up no matter what, and always have it as a positive light. Always be positive. Never say anything bad about your wife. Never talk down about your wife, and try and just be that positive person, because eventually they're going to recognize that the wife, their ex-wife, is the one that's being negative, and that all the stuff she's saying is not true. It's going to come to light at some point. It may not be right now because they're still in high school, so they're still getting there, all his children, getting to adulthood, that is. And so I want to bring that up real quick. So if you're going through that, make sure that you just stay positive, because eventually 10, 20, 30 years from now, your children are going to recognize who was the one that was actually right. And unfortunately, in this case, it's probably going to be the husband, the guy that we were talking to, instead of the wife. And it's not about proving right or wrong, but it's about proving that you are there for your children. So if you're going through that, make sure you're doing that. But with this whole talk, we were talking about divorce and everything, and you would have never known if we wouldn't open up. And that's what I'm going to talk about today on my speech, is that you need to open up in your personal brand and be able to talk about what it is personally about yourself. And when you talk about things on a personal level, you get open, you get vulnerable, as a lot of social media likes to talk about. Other people will open up. Other people will recognize that you know them. So I take stories like this, and this is how I prepare for my speech. I take stories like this and implement them into my speech. I have my overall structure in my head, the skeleton structure, and my talking points that I want to make sure I cover, and then I bring stories in that happen throughout days that come up to the event, stories that have happened to me a long time ago, whatever I can use to help relate and solidify that thought to the audience. So that's how I really prepare for a speech. And then when it's like game day, when it's time for me to go up there, the biggest thing I do is I know that first question, that first couple of sentences that I'm going to say for that speech. And once I get into those first couple of sentences, I'm good to go. Usually the nerves are calmed down by then, because yes, I do get nervous. A lot of people think that I don't get nervous. I'm a very calm spirit overall. And a lot of people just get way more nervous when it comes to speaking. But for me, what helps me get over those nerves is just knowing I'm going to talk about these things. I'm focused on the audience and bringing them value. And when I bring them value, And when I focus on them and I know what I'm going to talk about at the beginning, the rest happens. But if you're not like that, yes, get that practice in. Make sure that you've really got it down. Make sure you know your points, what stories you're going to talk about, what lessons you're going to teach, and what impact you want to leave your audience with. But as you get better and better at this and do this more and more, you're going to notice that you probably won't have to do that as much. And you'll also notice, and this is one thing when I first got into speaking that I didn't realize, but all the greats out there, they don't have a new speech every time they go on stage. They don't. I've heard Ed Mylett, Jesse Itzler, Russell Brunson. All three of those guys are very good speakers. They are way wealthier than I am and make way more money than I do. And all three of those guys, I've heard them at least twice on stage. And guess what? Same exact speech. Same exact speech, same exact stories. They just tell them a little bit better the next time. And the speech just gets better and better. And it doesn't happen all the time. Like, yeah, I saw them for a second time, but I understood where they were at. And so if you're in that predicament, you're like, man, I gotta come up with a new speech every time. No, you don't. You're not gonna be an expert. You don't do that in your business. In your business, you don't say, okay, I sold this product to this person, or I sold this service to this person. I can't sell it to them again. You think Kellogg's or Hershey, I'm in Hershey, Pennsylvania, so you think Hershey would be out of business if they sold a candy bar to one person and that's the only time they sold it to them? Yeah, they wouldn't be the brand that they are today if they didn't. So keep that in mind. You can tell that story again and again and again to people. I suggest finding other ways to solidify the thoughts you're going to give, unless it's a great story, it's a great personal story. Like Ed Mylett, I know it tells a phenomenal personal story about his dad and his son and everything, and really draws in emotion and brings people in to his story as he speaks. But maybe you just have some random stories, like I'm going to use this story from yesterday where we're going to talk about how all of a sudden everybody was relating with divorce, and we were having a conversation around that because one person opened up about their divorce and everything. So take stories, use them to help enhance what you're trying to get across, help people understand more, because people can understand more from a story than from data, from you just telling them a fact. So find those stories. But for you to prepare for a speech, and what I do personally is I just think about it, I visualize in my head, what is this going to look like? What am I going to look like speaking on stage? What does the audience look like? Who are they? Who do I want to speak to? And I focus on one person. I focus on one type of person and speak to them. I don't speak to the whole audience. Because once you get over 5 or 10 people, it's useless anyways. You're not going to reach anybody. So make sure that you focus on that. So do that visualization like I do, finding stories throughout the day, throughout the week as you go. Maybe try and find them before the night before, but find those stories. Or if you're not like me, where you can just visualize and have a rough draft, a rough idea of what it is you're going to talk about, then be prepared. Prep ahead of time. Write down that outline. I would not write down word for word. Write down the outline, write down your bullet points, write down the stories you want to speak about, and start practicing. Get on video just like this, like, hey guys, welcome back to another episode, or I guess in this case you wouldn't be speaking like that, because that's what I do for my intro for my podcast. Be like, today I want to talk to you about storytelling, and then you kind of go into that. So start preparing that speech. Go through the whole thing. Go through the intro. Go through the close. I almost said closure. Go through the close there. Go through each point. Just break it down one point after another. Look at those transitions. Okay, start the transition at your first point, and then go to transition to the second point, and then third point, how many points you have, but practice it however you need to. So practice, visualize, whatever it takes. But for myself personally, how I get prepared for a speech is to visualize, and whenever I'm there at game day, right before I get on stage, I know those first couple of sentences I'm going to say to help me get over that fear, those nerves of being there on stage. And once I get to those first few words, if I can speak right, once I get to those first few sentences, not words, but even words, but sentences more so, then I'm good to go. Those nerves pretty much die down. So I hope that was helpful. If you have any questions, make sure to send me a DM or shoot me an email. Would love to answer your question. And I got this question from somebody in the audience previously on one of my Facebook post. So if you've got any questions like this, would love to address them here in the podcast. But with that, you guys have a healthy and blessed day.